Katy, welcome. It's a delight to have you back. It was great to hear from you at lunchtime. And I'm now going to hand over to you for about half an hour or so. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers, which people can put in the chat in the meantime. But Katy, feel free to ignore the questions when you see them pop up, unless you see one that particularly fits with what you're saying in that moment. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex, for the invitation to speak this evening. And thank you all very much for coming along and giving up your evening to discuss this important topic. I'm going to share some slides with you now. Let's get those ready. Okay. So as Alex was explaining, I'm Katy and I've been working for AtALoss since August 2020. I am the General Manager of the Bereavement Journey for AtALoss, which means that I support churches to run the peer support programme for their congregations and their wider communities. There's a nice photo of me when it was a bit warmer than it is now. So AtALoss has two main areas of work. Our signposting website, ataloss.org, which helps people to find the information and support that they need when they've been bereaved, and also informs and equips those who are supporting bereaved people. And our church's work comes under the Loss and Hope umbrella, and this involves equipping churches to become more accessible and bereavement friendly in a number of ways, including encouraging them to run the bereavement journey. And we're very proud that hot off the press this week, the Bereavement Journey won an award for the Best Grief Support Programme at the 2024 Funeral Services Awards in recognition of its quality and effectiveness. And I'm delighted to speak to you today, as I said, about the very important topic of supporting older people in their bereavement. First, a note about self-care. Please be aware that this session might raise feelings in you of grief for anyone who has been bereaved, and not just recently. So please feel free to take a break if you need to, seek support. And self-care is really crucial for those involved in this ministry. And as Alex said, the slides and the recording will be circulated afterwards, so you won't miss anything if you do feel that you need to take a break. So here is an outline of what we're going to cover. First of all, some common experiences of older bereaved people, some thoughts on what we can do to help, a little bit about signposting, some resources that you might find helpful, and some further training if you'd like to look into that, ways to stay connected, some opportunities for questions, and then prayer at the end. So I'm going to stop sharing there so that this next section gives you a bit of a break from PowerPoint slides. So it's really important to recognise that there are some common bereavement experiences that everyone will have, no matter what their age or life experience. But this evening we're going to focus on the specific issues that older people are likely to face at this time. We can often find that when someone's life partner dies, this can cause a person to end up in crisis. Their entire world was based around that person and the life they shared, and they may not have had friends as an individual. If they had a traditional relationship where the husband took care of the finances and the wife looked after things in the home, the death of one partner can mean that there's an incredibly steep learning curve for the person left behind. Learning how to manage money, especially in today's technical world where most things are done online, can feel like an impossible task. And this can put people at risk from scammers who prey financially on vulnerable people. One of my colleagues was recently supporting a local retired farmer whose wife had died, and he was used to coming home at the end of the day and a meal being ready for him. And he had no experience of preparing food at all. And so when somebody very kindly gave him some chicken to have for dinner, he didn't know that it needed to be defrosted before cooking. So this can cause safety issues as well. And that huge hole that we end up going into, admin, or as some people quite accurately call it, sadmin, when somebody dies, paperwork, form filling, changes with the bank and other institutions, all of this is likely to be very overwhelming for an older person without support, especially with the prevalence these days of things being done online, as I just mentioned. And with finances specifically, if the person who died didn't have power of attorney organised, this is made even more difficult. And again, navigating those systems is harder as an older person. And add in the fact that often one partner handled the finances, and you have a recipe for confusion and upset. And when someone's partner dies, as is the most common bereavement in later life, it can be the case that they've been a carer for them to a greater or lesser degree. And so when that carer dies, the one who has been cared for has to make a choice about whether to arrange care, perhaps for carers to come into the house or to go into residential care at a time when they're likely to find making major decisions all but impossible. Someone who had been experiencing memory loss but hadn't yet been diagnosed with dementia, for example, can find that losing a loved one can exacerbate that, and that they're no longer coping. Their routine is thrown out, and a deterioration in their cognitive abilities can be the result. Again, meaning that decisions need to be made about additional support at an already difficult time. And older people can have a real tendency to feel that they need to be resilient, and they often are. And feel they need to have a stiff upper lip, and can have that sort of "I don't need to talk about stuff" mentality. But most of society doesn't give older people the chance to talk anyway, not just about loss and bereavement. And we're really going against the tide of what's normal in our culture here by offering this important support. However, given space and time to share, we can find that they very often don't stop talking. Another thing that can be uncovered as part of a bereavement is a lack of contact or even neglect from a person's family, which can be extremely difficult to hear and to manage. When somebody's bereaved when they're younger, they would tend to have more choices, probably access to a car, the ability to choose whether to go on holiday or to travel, to see family. A younger person will often talk some while after a bereavement about facing a new chapter in their life, perhaps thinking of moving to a new area, getting a new job. They will have a greater length of time to be making decisions and big life changes like these than an older person will. And they are not necessarily thinking about their own mortality. Whereas an older person has much less choice in terms of mobility. Often the person who died was the only driver, and the person left behind is unlikely to choose to learn to drive at that stage of life, so their world can shrink massively. They're unlikely to be looking for a new chapter and more concerned with just surviving what's going on for them. Big decisions are often needed, moving into supported living or residential care, maybe moving in with or to be nearer to family. And all of these things represent major changes on top of the bereavement. Talking about what the future holds for an older bereaved person needs great sensitivity. It's likely to make them aware of their vulnerability and to remind them of their own mortality. If they're a person of faith, then one of two things can happen. Bereavement will always affect someone's faith. It rarely stays the same. Some people find that their faith is strengthened, that it becomes even more of a rock to them, and they can feel God close to them, even closer to them in their time of greatest need. For others, they can experience a faith crisis where God seems to have disappeared for them, and they can feel abandoned by him. And this is a really common bereavement reaction. and we should recognise it and normalise it as such. Let's move on now to some suggestions of things that can be done to help. I'd like to share here a short film, which was recorded during the pandemic, but is still very relevant today, but just bear in mind the pandemic context when you listen. It talks about the importance of 3 words in relation to bereavement support: contact, listen, and bless.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Kate Botley. We all know someone who's been bereaved, and while it's never easy to know what to say and do, right now things are more difficult than they usually are. The Church of England, working with AtALoss and other bereavement charities, have been thinking about some of the ways we might continue to support those around us during this time of social distancing. So here they are. Firstly, make contact. Get in touch. People who are grieving need support, but we might just step back for fear of not knowing what to say. Send a card, letter, message, flowers, or a gift, saying sorry about their loss and that we're thinking of them. Perhaps if you knew the person, sharing what you remember of them and how they will be missed. And at the end of the letter or card, say you don't expect them to respond. That takes the pressure off. Call. Use the phone. But perhaps don't video call, not without asking first. Be aware that they might not want to answer though. Leave a message, saying when you'll call again, and that it's okay if they don't feel like picking up. Offer practical help. Lots of us can leave the house for essential exercise and trips, and offer to do their shopping, meals, dog walking or gardening might be helpful. Making the first move is important. Think about what and when, rather than expect them to think and approach you. Even at a distance, it might be possible to support them by doing some admin or phone calls on their behalf. Secondly, listen. We mustn't think we know. Every bereavement is different and reactions are likely to change, especially in the current situation. Even if you've been bereaved, or even if you've trained as a grief counsellor, we can't always know what this particular person is going through or what they're experiencing right now. So ask. Ask about the person who's died. Ask about what happened and about feelings and issues. Listen carefully and then ask again and again. The more they tell the story, the more it could help them to process their loss. This next one's really important. Don't give solutions. My idea of what would make me feel better are my ideas and not theirs. And assuring them that this time will be healing or that everything works out for a reason belittles what they're facing right now. Hear the problems and hear their reactions. Assure them that it's all normal and acknowledge their pain. It's okay to not be okay. Finally, bless. Brighten someone's day. Think about what could be said, done or given to make someone who is grieving feel special and loved. This can make life feel worth living. Don't be the only one. Check it's not just you. Make sure others are around supporting too. And do refer someone to specialist services. There are lots out there to help. Peer support is valuable. Finding someone to come alongside who's experiencing loss as well can be really helpful. And seeing that those people are surviving can often bring genuine hope. Keep going. Be prepared to be in this for the long haul, especially right now. The grief journey is usually long and complicated, and it'll often get worse before it feels any better. But most support will drop away after the first few weeks, so commitment is important. Use this as an opportunity to find out more about how to be alongside the person through all their grief journey and pain. So to recap, 3 things. Contact, listen, and bless.
Thank you, Sue. So, as the film described, it's really important to bear in mind that every person and every bereavement is different and unique. And what's right for one person might well be the last thing that someone else would find helpful. And there's no one size fits all. It's always going to be really important to check that what we're offering or suggesting is helpful rather than thinking that we know. And the most important of those three words we just heard about is listen. Letting the person in front of us tell their story over and over again, as many times as is necessary. We may well be the only person willing to dedicate the time to letting them talk and really listening as they share their memories and feelings about the person who died is extremely helpful and validating as well. I shall go back to my slides here. So AtALoss.org was established with the aim of providing quality, tailored, timely signposting support to those who've been bereaved and those supporting them so that nobody struggles to find the help that they need. And on the site, you will find a range of services, including a live counsellor grief chat service, a range of information such as articles by subject specialists on specific issues. Details of emergency support is there, and all those well-known national organisations, as well as the smaller local services that aren't so well known. There are over 2,000 bereavement support services listed on the website, and you can tailor your search to the specific circumstances and needs of the person that you're supporting. So, for example, the type of bereavement, the type of support needed, and very importantly, the geographical area. And the website is constantly updated to make sure that the services listed are still in operation. So you can be sure that the information is accurate and reliable, and very importantly, free of charge to access. If an older person is unwell or has been unable to attend a funeral for some other reason, they're likely to feel very upset that they weren't able to pay their respects. And we can support someone to be involved, even if they can't attend, as well as supporting them to hold their own memorial, both of which could be very much appreciated. And a link to a resource about this on the AtALoss.org website will follow with more information about both of these. Let's have another break from the slides. When thinking about supporting an older bereaved person, there is a distinction to be made between people who are mobile and can get out and about and those who are housebound. And so we need to bear this in mind when thinking of ways that we can support people. And it's really important to make things as easy and as accessible as possible. As churches, we can consider organising events or outings, bearing in mind that transport could be an issue. Visits to the theatre, a local garden, or a meal in a pub. All things that someone would have done with the person who died can be really appreciated. We are often told that for those who've been bereaved, that weekends, and particularly Sunday afternoons, are the loneliest part of the week. I can see some nodding here. And it can seem that everyone else is busy with their family and their friends, and that can really magnify their isolation even more. And Befriended, a charity based in mid-Sussex, holds regular tea parties on Sunday afternoons, encouraging regular contact, reducing loneliness, and giving opportunities for connection and talking about the person who has died. They also organise visits and trips, fall prevention seated exercise classes, meals out with company, and even a community choir, But smaller social events are an excellent way to start. A drop-in cafe, a Sunday afternoon tea, lunch at a local pub. Let's move on to some resources that you might find helpful. Back to the slides. Founder of AtALoss, Reverend Canon Yvonne Tulloch, has written a very helpful booklet called Faith Questions in Bereavement, which offers her thoughts on the 10 most commonly asked questions about faith and spirituality when someone's been bereaved. People have been finding it a really helpful resource to leave with someone that they're visiting after a bereavement, and it's available from the Bereavement Journey website shop. As I mentioned before, a bereavement can very often make someone more aware of their own mortality and raise questions about faith. And so offering this as a conversation starter can be really useful. It's suitable to give to somebody who has a strong faith, someone whose faith has been shaken by their loss, as well as somebody of no faith at all. Bereavement care awareness training is some further training you might like to have a think about. It's run by Care for the Family, and it equips congregations to support people who've been bereaved in their church and in the local community. We think so highly of it that our recently recruited new team members in AtALoss have all done this training just because we think it's so good. It helps people to understand the right things to say to come alongside somebody who's been bereaved, as well as some things to avoid saying too. Bereavement-friendly church webinars are run by AtALoss, and it's training for churches that encourages the people who come along to have a think about assessing how accessible their church is to bereaved people. We find bereaved people tell us often that church is the hardest place to be, and we look into the reasons behind that and encourage people to think about whether some of those things might be going on in their church, and lots of practical suggestions on things that we can do for support. And as the general manager of the Bereavement Journey, you would expect me to say something about that, I'm sure. It's a 7-session series of films and discussion, which helps people bereaved in any way and at any time to process their loss. And the final session is optional, and that gives them the chance to explore faith questions arising in their bereavement from a Christian perspective. And all the faith content is contained in this optional 7th session, so you can confidently recommend it to anyone of any faith or no faith at all. And there are now over 380 courses being run by churches across the UK, and you can find out more about how you can join that growing family by visiting the Bereavement Journey website. Let's look at some other resources now. As I mentioned before, do take a look at the ataloss.org website. It has a wealth of resources and information for you to read and share. You'll, I'm sure, be familiar with the BRF website and their excellent resources, but I'd like to draw your attention to a free booklet download written by Gail Miller of Befriended, which is called Grief Conversations. And that offers comfort and practical advice for those who've been bereaved and those who care for them as well. And we find that bite-sized information such as booklets and cards are likely to be better than hefty books that require long periods of concentration. And an excellent resource is the Postcards of Hope, and those are also available from the BRF website. Another resource from Befriended is their new Compassionate Conversations short course, which has been designed to support people who are grieving the loss of a person or a living loss, such as the loss of health or a relationship or their independence. And you can find out more about this on their website. The Anna chaplains in my area are planning to have some small bags available at the back of our churches or to take with them when they're visiting. which will contain perhaps a holding cross, some positive Bible verses, and the contact details of the pastoral support team. I often pop into our church during the day, and very often there'll be somebody there just sitting quietly. And so having something available that they can take away with them is really helpful. Creative ideas are also excellent, helping people to find their own creativity to express their feelings, whether that be writing a poem, a drawing, or some other artistic activity. Craft activities such as, perhaps as we approach Christmas, creating a simple Christmas decoration with remembering in mind. We can also hold special services in our churches to give the opportunity to remember at various points of the year. And we've just passed through the season of remembering, from All Souls to Remembrance, and many churches will have held an annual remembering service at that time. In our church, we have an annual remembering service, and we lay out luggage labels and encourage people to write the name of someone onto that who they would like to remember. And a little later on in the service, they're collected in, and while reflective music is played, the names are read out, each person lights a candle, and the luggage tags are tied onto a rocking chair, which represents the empty chair at home. It's always well attended and very much appreciated. And as we approach Christmas, not everyone is feeling jolly and bright, and so offering a more reflective service can be helpful. Here we have an annual star service where a small Christmas tree decoration is offered and names written on them again, and the stars are then placed on the Christmas tree in the church. And on the Loss and Hope website, you'll find resources for remembering at Christmas as well as at other times of the year. Giving the opportunity to talk and be listened to is often a greater gift than providing materials and resources. It's also really important that we know when and how to refer to other agencies for support if we have any concerns. This next slide has our contact details so that you can keep in touch with us. And an email is going to follow, as Alex said, with the slides and the links to the websites that I've mentioned. And we'd love it if you would sign up for our newsletter if you'd like to be kept up to date with our work. So I wonder now if there are any questions or comments or other resources that you have found helpful that you'd like to share.
Thank you, Katie. That's been so helpful and so good to reflect on the differences. What a difference it is to people who are bereaved and in later life compared to younger people, and also just some lovely ideas about how can we help people to express their grief and join them on that bereavement journey. I thought in particular one of the things that was said. I don't know whether it was you or whether it was Kate Botley who said it, but this idea of being committed and being in it for the long run.
Yeah.
I remember when my mum died, my dad said a few months later, a little bit cynically, I suppose, he said, "Well, wasn't it interesting? We had a lot of people come around when it was all exciting, and when the excitement, as he called it, wore off, everybody disappeared." And as the grieving widower, he really felt that people had been very um, thoughtful and caring in the early days, but then their commitment waned and they really weren't in it for the long haul.
Yeah, and once the funeral is over and you've written the cards to thank the people who came and all that sort of thing, and you've dealt with the funeral directors for the last time, people just kind of fade away, don't they? And we can sort of step in there, and remembering anniversaries as well is really important. So many people forget, and just a little calendar, whether that be an online calendar or a little desk-based calendar, with the important dates in it for the people that you're supporting, people in your congregations maybe. Just remembering that, you know, this week might be a bit more difficult than usual because it's the lead up to the anniversary, or the funeral date, you know, just remembering those can be so important and appreciated and unexpected sometimes from the person who's been bereaved. They might not necessarily expect you to remember that, but remembering it shows them that you haven't forgotten. They haven't forgotten, but showing that you haven't either is really appreciated.
Yeah, and as was said, the grief journey can be very long and complex, and so for some people, grieving doesn't really begin until after the funeral, after the cards have been sent. So for everybody to disappear at that point,
Yeah,
obviously
we're often just kind of numb until that point, or even longer after. You know, if we've got to get straight back to work, or if we've got to deal with family members, or we've got other responsibilities, caring responsibilities, we just kind of push everything down and carry on, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. So no, lots of really helpful things, and this idea of um faith in some being strengthened during the time of bereavement, and yet for some being a crisis point. And I guess that's where we need to have that sensitivity to just stand alongside somebody, whatever their experience. And
yeah, we can tend to assume that if somebody has been a person of strong faith up until that time, that they will be somebody whose faith has been strengthened. But
yes.
sometimes the person with the strongest faith can find it completely falls away, and we can be expecting them to react in a certain way. So we mustn't be surprised if they tell us that that's not happening for them.
Yeah. Yes, that's where the listening element really comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. Sue, do we have any questions or comments that you'd like to read out for us?
We've got one question that's come in saying, please can you signpost me to help a person with a living loss of a long time ministry due to chronic ill health, due to the stress and workload of that ministry?
Yes, that's a tricky one, isn't it? The bereavement journey deals specifically with bereavement by death. Bereavement can be used in a wider context to talk about various different kinds of loss, but the bereavement journey is specifically for bereavement by death. But the compassionate conversations resource that I mentioned by Befriended, that does deal with living loss of relationships, of jobs, of abilities, of mobility, all that kind of thing. So that would be very appropriate in that context.
Thank you, Katie. Can you tell us a bit more about the bereavement journey? The course, how does it work? Do we pay, or is it online? Is it in real life? What is it?
Absolutely. Well, it can be run online. We run it as AtALoss 3 times a year on a national basis. It's running at the moment. But churches are running it for their communities, in person mainly. But some churches are still having the occasional online course for people who can't get out and about, or who are busy working, or have got caring responsibilities. So it runs just as well online as in person, but most courses are in person now. It's a little bit like Alpha in that there's a film and then some discussion afterwards. The participants are supported by a manual which has activities and reflections that they can look at between the sessions, because between the sessions is when the grief work and the processing takes place. The resource costs £25. You purchase a taster pack, and that gives you everything you need to know to make your decision as to whether it's what you want to do. And when you do and you register with us, that is free of charge. The only other cost is the manual, the participant manual. And as usual, the more you buy, the cheaper they are. But £4.95 per copy is the most expensive. So if you were able to invest in more, then they are less expensive the more you purchase. But that 7th session is the faith questions session, and there's no faith content in the rest other than a short closing prayer if the leader feels that that's appropriate for their context. So you can use it as an outreach resource as well. And we're finding that churches and course leaders tell us that actually 90% of the people who come along choose to come to that optional session, whether they thought they were going to at the beginning or not.
Yeah.
They feel so connected with the group that they're in. They've shared so much with them that they want to finish at the same time as everybody else. And also they're curious by that point as well. So it's been really helpful.
Sounds really good. Obviously, as you know, as a bereavement tool, but also as an outreach to welcome bereaved people in the community over the church threshold, make new friends, find people who are in a similar situation. Sounds good. Sue, I think we've got some more questions and comments. Would you like to share them with us?
We've got a couple more questions. Most of the comments are saying thanks for the links and things like that. So, but about the questions, what about anticipatory grief?
Yes, absolutely. So anticipatory grief, if you're not familiar with the phrase, is grieving before somebody dies. So there might have been a terminal diagnosis, a diagnosis of dementia, and the grieving process begins before the death. We have material in the bereavement journey about this, and we have people who attend the online course and locally run courses for anticipatory grief. We would always advise, though, that they bear in mind that the material will go ahead of where they are, but they are welcome to attend again later on after the death, so that then they can benefit from the material in a different way. But it is very supportive of people in anticipatory grief. Yeah.
Thank you.
Questions are coming in thick and fast now. So, what's the format for a bereavement cafe?
They vary. Some bereavement cafes are just a place for refreshments and general chat. Some resources might be available on a table at the side, or you might find they're more, excuse me, more facilitated in that people who have done a bit of training and are experienced in bereavement support will be dotted around and talking specifically. There are some resources. The Church of England has the Grave Talk resources, which are very helpful for starting conversations. There's also some training by a CIC, a community interest company. I don't remember what CIC stands for, but it's like a charity, and they're called the Bereavement Cafe, and they offer training in setting up a bereavement cafe and how that could work for you. But it really varies. We do find some churches who have a bereavement cafe, then they decide they want something more, they want to offer some more support. So they will run the bereavement journey, and the people who come to the cafe then come to the bereavement journey. And then it sort of acts as a sort of holding area. So if you're not running the bereavement journey for a few months, come to the cafe and get to know some people first. And then after the course, people want to stay in touch with the people that they've met and got to know so well on the course. So coming to the cafe afterwards is an excellent place for them to stay in touch. And we really encourage those follow-on social opportunities, because again, we don't want to offer some support and then it ends and people are back where they started.
You just mentioned the bereavement journey again. Are the bereavement journey sessions best done weekly or monthly?
Weekly. If they're monthly, then that leaves people a bit too long without any, I'm not saying there wouldn't be any other support, but weekly is the best. Some people will divide it up over 14 weeks to make the sessions a bit shorter. We have a couple of residential centres that actually run the course over a week with a session a day with dedicated time for processing in between, but weekly is best. Yeah.
And another question, faced with the I can cope stiff upper lip, do we persevere or do we leave them alone?
Oh, that's a very good question, isn't it? Because You don't want to leave them alone if actually what they really are after is some support, but you don't want to make a nuisance of yourself either, do you? I think, as Kate Botley was saying in the film, keep getting in touch, but don't be surprised or disappointed if the help is not offered. You can always pop round and put a note through the door. You'll probably want to decrease the frequency so that you find you're not making a nuisance of yourself. But in an invitation through the door or in the post to an annual remembering event might be a nice thing to do in case at that point it's the right thing. We never know what our support is going to lead to, do we? So I think continuing to offer opportunities to connect and see if the stiff upper lip trembles a little bit and somebody decides that yes, they do want to speak to you now. It's important to try to find out, if we can, that there is some support somewhere for that person, even if they don't necessarily want to take up the offers that we're making.
Good point. And the last one I've got is not a question, it's a comment. We have people referred to us by social prescribing at the local health centre to our bereavement support group.
Oh, that's
Which is
fantastic. There's so little support out there in the community for people who've been bereaved, and often someone will go to their GP and the GPs just haven't got very much time to share with people. So the social prescribers are delighted to find out that support is being provided by churches. And letting your local GP surgery know, your social prescribers, your health centres, the funeral directors often will refer people for support. Just making your support as widely known as possible so that as many people as possible can benefit within the limits of our capacity, of course. But yeah, social prescribers are a great partnership, and lots of the churches who run the bereavement journey or bereavement cafes will collaborate with the social prescribers. We even have one church who's run the course. I think they must be into the teens by now. They run it 2 or 3 times a year. They just love it. And the social prescribers are they actually took over the waiting list for the bereavement journey because they said, well, we'll just manage this for you. We think it's so great and people have found it so helpful. They're virtually helping to run it now as well, which is wonderful.
Brilliant.
You were saying, oh, sorry,
Sorry.
Sue. Just on that, just to follow up on that before we go on to the other question. You mentioned earlier, Katie, that in some areas the waiting list for bereavement counselling or support can be 18 months. And,
Yeah.
just hearing that just made me, realise again what a massive job the churches are doing. And seniors ministries in providing something,
Yes.
whether it's a course, whether it's a cafe, whether it's an annual service, whether it's a friendly chat and a trip to the garden centre. Churches are filling this tremendous gap. Imagine
really
being
are.
left out there on your own for 18 months with your grief.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important what you're all doing and so appreciated. 18 months is a horrendous length of time to be suffering and in need without any support. So filling that gap is wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you. Sue, I think you've got a couple more for us, and then I'm going to share some notices, I think.
Great. So does AtALoss work with churches in Scotland or just England?
The whole of the UK. We work with anyone who wants to work with us. The bereavement journey is running all across the UK. I'm in Wales. There's a locations map on the bereavement journey website if you'd like to have a look at where courses are running near you. And as I said, we run it online 3 times a year. And because it's national, we tend to have larger numbers than a church would be able to manage in a local course. So we're able to group people in peer groups. So we usually need to run a group for people who have experienced child loss, whether the loss of an adult child or a younger child. Usually a group for people who've been bereaved by suicide, parent loss, lots of partner loss, as you'd expect. But because we can offer it more widely. We can put people in peer groups so that they can benefit from being in a group with someone who's got some shared experience with them, which is really helpful. But running it locally with just one group, it works just as well.
Okay, I think I had one last question, which is how would you advertise the bereavement journey and where would you advertise it?
Oh, I would advertise it anywhere and everywhere that a bereaved person is likely to see it. So online, on your website, on social media, in your local community groups online, and then posters, good old-fashioned posters in your church, outside your church, doctor surgeries, your library, the funeral directors, as I mentioned, the GP surgery. If you're going
Local
to have
paper?
the local paper, yeah, if you can get onto the local radio, they're always looking for local stories. We've had quite a few churches who advertise their church on the radio, and actually you're then reaching a wider network of people than perhaps just your own congregation. Some people will run it for their own congregation first, just to find their feet, and then widen it afterwards, the second time they run it. But we often find people saying that, oh, I've run it 2 or 3 times now, and somebody who came the first time has said they'd like to help. So it can be sort of self-sustaining in that way, obviously judging whether you feel that they are in a place where they can offer support to others at that point.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katy. It's been so good to hear your prepared talk, but also all of this great information you shared that's come out through the questions. So thank you for everything that you've brought this evening, Katy. And also thank you to everybody who's put in questions and comments. And I can see some people in the chat are connecting more locally, which is always good to see as well. Katy, I'm going to go on to give some notices shortly, but I wonder if before I do that, you would pray for everybody.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we come before you with hearts full of compassion and empathy for those who are supporting friends and family and community members through their grief. Grant them the strength and patience they need to be a comforting presence. May they find the right words to say and the wisdom to know when to simply listen. Bless them with endurance and resilience as they offer their shoulders to cry on and their hands to hold. Fill their hearts with your peace so that they can share it with those who are hurting. Let them be a beacon of your love and grace, providing solace and hope in times of sorrow. We ask that you comfort and uplift the church champions, giving them moments of rest and renewal. Surround them with your love and let them feel your presence, knowing they are not alone in their efforts. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Katy.